Hey, we're going to be doing something a little different this week. As you know, we do ceramics all the time in the studio, and I love to make things. And I'm always looking for a creative outlet that doesn't involve clay or the business of art. That sometimes is block printing. I'll do a lot of block printing for fun. That is sometimes making model kits, which I love doing. But I thought I'd do something different, a new, exciting, big project. And it's so big, in fact, that I'm going to be recording the process of it. And that project is Fireball Island. I cannot tell you how excited I am about this. So Fireball Island was released in 1986 by Milton Bradley. It is a massive board game, and it's got, I guess, a cult following. I remember it. So back in 1986, I think I was like a freshman in high school. I do vividly remember this game being on the shelf at KB Toys, and it was like at the top shelf of the game section, and it was above and beyond the most expensive game there, and I always was intrigued by it, but I never got it. Anyway, fast forward to now, I'm an older fellow, and I was able to find this one on eBay. If you want a complete game, you're looking at spending something like $300-ish. I got this one for, I think it was about $60. Anyways, it's not complete. It only has a few of the parts. The rest we're going to build. But it most critically has this. What's the game board? Look at this thing. It's ridiculous. So one of the coolest things about the board is this gameplay. Your characters have to make their way up the mountain while avoiding these fireballs, which are actually marbles. If you get the right card, you get to launch a fireball. Maybe there's a bridge. Here's one of the cool bridges that come with the game. Unfortunately, I only have one of the two bridges, so I'm going to have to make the other bridge. So what have we got? Well, in addition to the board, I've got some of the playing cards, not all. I've got some players, I've got this little like jewel holder, and I've got a bridge, only one of the two bridges. I also, thank God for the internet, was able to print out the entire instruction manual. Now the little guys are super cool. I've got 3 of them. There are supposed to be 4. And for marbles, the game uses a standard marble, so I went and found some fireball colored marbles. The coolest thing to me about this game is the 3D terrain. It's this super cool island, Fireball Island, in which you've got little players that have to make their way along these paths up to the top. On the top, which is sadly missing because I don't have the complete game, would be this Volcar, this volcanic idol that would spit these fireballs out. They attack guys. Anyways, it's complicated. Lots of people on YouTube have done amazing discussions of how the game plays, so I'm not going to go there. What I will do, and I want to do, is I want to make this a super cool piece of furniture for my house that I can play with and then put away and hide. Anyway, I'm really excited. I'm in the pie in the sky dream part. I know I've got to build a new Volcar. I know that I want to maybe put some lights in this thing. This game has these caves. These are these areas where, your player's supposed to be able to go into one area and come out another, but they don't really look like caves. I want them to look like caves. I want to do a lot. But the first thing I want to do is make an entirely new board. This board is vacuum formed. It's made out of a thin plastic, and vacuum forming means that they had a sculpture of the game board, and they would heat up a big sheet of plastic and thump, drop it down and suck it down onto that sculpture with vacuum. And that's how lots of parts are made very quickly. The current game board, it's pretty rigid, but I won't be able to sculpt onto this and add onto it. I want to make a whole new base. And to do that, I'm going to make a new vacuum form piece, basically. I'm going to have this thing flipped over. I'm going to fill it up with a epoxy, 2-part epoxy putty, and then pull that epoxy putty out, and I'll have a rigid, strong epoxy version of Fireball Island, if it works. So a couple of concerns I have about doing my first big step, which is making the epoxy version of the board game, is this game it's pretty warped as it is. It's been mashed inside of the box, which, as you can see, has seen better days. And I can tell that this mountain tip, the highest point of the island, has been squished down so much that it's actually warped the whole board. Secondly, this epoxy putty, it's an exothermic epoxy, meaning when I mix it up in the 2 parts, As it gets harder, it generates a lot of heat while it sets. And since this plastic is made soft and bendable by heat, I'm worried that it will warp and distort. So I'm going to build a jig that will hold the shape. Two things I want to do. I want to hold the shape, and I want to correct the warp that's happened through the 30 some odd years that this has sat in a box. So the main thing here is I want to keep stuff super square. So I'm going to make a box very similar to the boxes that I use when I am pouring silicone molds that will hold the game up. I want to hold that game board up in a super square fashion, and it will also push down the center of the board to compensate for the warping that it had while in the box. Okay. I am hoping that, oh, there it is. Yeah, that should get rid of all the distortion. And I think that we are ready to put in some epoxy. We are going to be using a whole variety of Smooth-On products. I am not sponsored by Smooth-On, but they make great stuff. So hey, if Smooth-On, if you want to sponsor me, feel free. First up, this mold release, which, well, it didn't quite work too well, spoilers. Then we have two forms of two-part sculptable epoxy. One is Freeform Sculpt, and then the second is this stuff called Freeform Air, which is also a two-part sculptable epoxy, but it's super lightweight. It's mostly air. I mean, it's ridiculously light. It weighs nothing. Okay, we're going to go for it. I am going to start pre-mixing the A and B. I'm going to make these little, I think I'm going to do like the size of like a racquetball. I'm going to set up a bunch of like spheres of A and spheres of B, and then I can mix them together. But from this point out, this stuff is stinky, so I'm going to be wearing a respirator, so don't expect a lot of me talking. Hopefully I can fill in, details with the voiceover. So two ways you can mix this stuff. You can use a scale and carefully measure out your proportions, or you can do what I'm doing and just eyeball it. I'm just making sure that I keep all these things uniform in size, and I'm going to match them with the part B. Okay, I did 15 of them in the A components. Now I'm going to switch to do 15 of the B. I don't know if that's as much as I'll need or not. That's why I am just kind of setting these up at the starter. If I don't need them all, I won't use them all. I'll just put them back in their individual components. Yeah, but I think I'm going to need them all. Anyway, on to part B. The B component is definitely the stickier of the two components. So it's a little trickier to mash it into a ball and keep the sizes uniform. But, it worked. All right, I think we're going to go for it. Again, I am confident that I'm going to get an epoxy board out of this. Not so confident that this plastic will be salvageable. I really hope it will be, but yeah, let's see what happens. So to kick things off, I grab a part A ball and a part B ball and mash them together very carefully and fold them and get them mixed as well as I can, and then start pressing them onto the board. Now this got tricky because the board is coated with mold release and the epoxy doesn't really want to stick to it. It really does just want to stick to my hand. So I grabbed a little spritzer of alcohol and that's helping, but yeah, it was a learning process. Okay, I've gotten through 2/3 of the epoxy that I pre-mixed, and I'm just shy of halfway through the board. Definitely am getting better at this, figuring out a better system. It's tricky because it's so sticky and I don't want to lift it away from the board as I'm applying it. So I am using alcohol, which I'll spray on my hand and then kind of smooth it out. I don't know. We seem to be cruising along. Let's keep going. Ta-da! It's done! And it is drying. This side, in fact, is already pretty hard. But it does take 24 hours to cure, so we will come back tomorrow and see if this is successful or if I'm going to have to destroy this board. I hope not. Oh, I have high hopes. We'll see. All right, it is the next day and it is rock hard. Now we're gonna find out if we can get this thing out of here. Oh man. super, super hopeful, but also, you know, you never know. Well, that came out. Yeah, like I said, 60% chance I can't get this out of here. We'll see. Oh. Sounds horrible. Okay, getting very sweaty. It's coming off, but yeah, sadly, I did damage the board. I realize this might be controversial, but the board will get some damage. I might be able to super glue it back together afterwards, but I do feel that the sacrifice will be worth it with the end goal I have in mind. The good news is the game itself, it's looking really cool. You know, the casting that we've done. So at least we got that going for us. Back at it. Okay, we've got some good news and some bad news. We're going to start with the bad news, and that is the board got a little destroyed in the demolding process. And by a little, I mean it's pretty wasted. But there's good news. The sacrifice of the board was not in vain. We have this. And look, it works. Woo! It's a perfect base to build an even better board with. Okie dokie, I've gone through and mapped back out all of the player positions on the board, and the red lines are where I'm going to get a little nuts. I want to bump everything up just a little bit in elevation. So I've got 2 lines. I'm going to be raising this corner up by 2 inches. So this will be inch number 1, inch number 2. And then I want to raise the center mountain up 2 inches from where it's at now. So Volcar will be like here instead of down here. I also got an actual Volcar in the mail, but I'm going to be resculpting this because it may be controversial for me to say, but I think he looks a little weird. I want him to look like an actual volcano. So anyway, it's time to actually start sawing this thing up. I'm using this insulation foam as a sacrificial support table while I'm cutting. If the jigsaw blade hits it, it won't mess up the cut and it won't mess up the blade. Okay, so the first corner test went pretty good. Here is how it was on the original. So I'm going to raise up this like about 1 inch, and then I'm going to raise the tippy top here even another inch. So that'll get a nice elevation change in the game. I'm pretty excited about it. Now do the mountain. I'm not going to lie, it's stressful cutting this thing up after putting so much time into making it, and I am a little worried about this coming back together in one piece. Oh my god, it has been weeks since I've had time to work on the game. I'm happy to be jumping on it now. Today, Clash of the Titans, 1980s Clash of the Titans is on the studio TV, and I am diving in to adding elevation. Remember last time I shot video of this, I was cutting out these sections so we could make the mountain higher. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to lift up those sections, epoxy them in, and yeah, then we get to start to add a lot of cool extra wonders to the island. Let's do it. The great thing about having Clash of the Titans on the studio TV is it gives me something to watch while the super glue sets on these little toothpick stilts that I'm making to hold up the parts. Okay, it looks like my little tongue depressor stilt idea worked out okay. I'm going to now put a little bit of super glue on these so they're not so wibbly wobbly, and then I'm going to mix up some more of the epoxy putty and, kind of pack it in here so that these by tomorrow will be, rigid and set, and then I can start doing some shaping and some sculpting on the rest of the board. So I did opt for hot glue instead of super glue to hold these parts in. It was just easier for me to get it in place and grab onto the parts quickly with. And I figure I can easily remove any extra that I don't want later. I will admit that putting this epoxy on sucked. I thought it would go on a lot easier, but once again, it really just wanted to stick to my gloves and not the board. So I flipped the board over and then packing it into the back section, which worked a lot better. Okie dokie, so that the freeform area is a little more fussy to deal with than I had planned. It just doesn't like to stick to stuff unless it's your hands. It loves sticking to your hands. But I got this stuff packed in there good enough so that by tomorrow it'll set up and this will be nice and sturdy. For the rest of the resculpting, I'm going to be using an actual sculpting epoxy, not this super lightweight stuff. So hopefully that works better. I don't know. We'll find out. But yeah, I know that the board looks awful right now, but I'm personally very excited because from here on out, it is going to be the creative part of this whole project where I get to think about, how I want the geography of the island to go and shaping the caves and fun stuff like that. So, yeah, every project has got to look terrible before it looks great. At least that's what I like to tell myself. Okay, as you can see, it is the next day and everything is nice and firm. I am going through with my handy dandy utility knife and file to kind of just smooth out areas where the step was really exaggerated and get ready for adding on extra, land. Now, I know you're probably watching this saying, hey, a rotary tool would be great for that. And I agree, but I don't have one. But I suspect by the time the next episode of this comes out, I will have a Dremel of some sort, or some sort of rotary tool to get in here and do some detail work. But this stuff actually cuts really nicely with a knife. Yeah, it's like a super, super, super dense foam. Yeah, so it's good for the rough stuff. It's good for the rough stuff. And I do have a marble standing by, so I can test and see if, the paths still work. And they do, for the most part. A couple of areas where there's a big step, I'm going to have to add a little extra bumper. But for the most part, I'm really happy with it. There's another bumper spot. Yeah, so a little more filing, a little more sanding, and then I'm going to bust out some insulation foam and add some landmass. This stuff does file and cut really nicely, and I think instead of getting a rotary tool, I might go ahead and just get some nicer small rasps that will let me shape some nice stone textures really easily and refine surfaces and planes. Okay, so I have been cutting up this insulation foam here with the idea that I could kind of mock up if I wanted to change a little bit of like the rock shapes on the island. I could do that with this foam and then cover it, like coat that with epoxy. So I'm trying to figure out how I want to change the geography. I want to put maybe like a little land bridge over here, something like that. But I realized I want to give it a little more planning and I want to do a couple tests on coating this stuff with epoxy before I commit. And the biggest thing I want to do is I want to change this guy, Volcar himself, because like I said before, I know that it's controversial, but I just think he looks goofy. I don't know why a volcano has horns. I don't know. So I'm going to resculpt him. I found out that he comes off and the base is really the critical part that holds the marble. So I might resculpt the entire top entirely. I don't know. Or I'm just going to cut the horns and the top of the head off and resculpt that with epoxy. But I realized this is a perfect time to stop for this this first episode of Fireball Island. So since we have the foundations are set, and the next episode is going to be all about building up on it. So thanks for hanging out with me for the adventure that is Fireball Island. Yeah, I will see you next time. Okay, I'm back really quick. So I was just taking the board into the glaze room over there, and I had an epiphany on how I want to change the board to make it more interesting. Since I raised up this elevation and I changed the kind of geography, I didn't change the gameplay. The gameplay is the same. The marble still works the same. But I just wanted to change the look of the island. I was really struggling with Volcar being the top upmost volcanic tip of the island because, like I said, he doesn't really look like a volcano. This doesn't look like a volcano. But I figured out that what if... Here, wait. I'm going to have to switch camera views. So here we go. Up the island. We're approaching the island by sea. Here's what the island looks like. So as it is in the normal gameplay, this is the top of the volcano, right? But what if this whole area was a cinder cone? So there's this big volcano on the island. This part is actually inside. I've drawn a green line, so this is the crater rim is going to be here, and Vulcar, the rock formation, is actually just on the uppermost edge of the crater rim. So when the gameplay will go through a tunnel right here and then come inside of the crater, there's a little like pathway along the inner edge of the crater. I'm going to cut this out so it goes deeper. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. So yeah, that's what we're going to do. And I can't wait. So that's next time when we return to the project, when we sail back to Fireball Island, it's going to be about building a bigger and better volcano. And I still want to resculpt this guy, but I will have him blend into, the crater edge. It's going to be great.